In those days, there was no king. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. If this was many thousands of years ago and there was some physical act of nature that could not be explained, such as wind or rain, it would be thought to have been caused by the gods. Scientists at the Fermilab collider outside Chicago discovered a godlike anomaly in April of 2022. This anomaly was measured in the mass of a subatomic particle, compared to what it should be according to the immutable laws of science. It is important to have perspective. There are no laws of physics or nature. There are consistent mathematical descriptions and theories of what we know as the natural world. But these theories are under no obligation to follow any laws. Nature does what it wants. For over 5 decades, a standard model has been applied and used to measure atomic particles' behavior accurately. Gravity, electromagnetism, strong nuclear forces, and weak nuclear forces. These make up the 4 classes of forces in our cosmos. The presence of a previously unknown 5th force of nature is similar to electromagnetism, except that instead of acting on electrons and protons and ignoring the neutrons, this 5th force operates between electrons and neutrons and ignoring the protons. This might explain the anomaly of dark matter, which does not conform to the standard model, which in turn cannot explain the presence of said dark matter, which is something that does not interact with regular matter, but can mold the cosmic web of the galaxy with its immense gravitational effect. Roughly 68% of the universe is dark energy. Dark matter makes up about 27%. The rest is everything. Everything that we've observed with all our instruments, all normal matter. It adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Mysteries matter. Einstein's theory, while widely accepted, faces challenges in explaining how gravity keeps everything together. To fill this gap, scientists propose the existence of dark matter, though there is no direct proof of its existence. Stay away from negative people. They have a problem for every solution. Before telegraphs and train travel, it didn't matter to many folks what time it was. When the sun is at its zenith, we assume it's about noon, but the zenith of the sun and the time are only relative to where you are. Communicating with a faraway country by telegraph made time synchronization a new necessity. Eventually, there was a compromise to slice the world into segments and give everyone a zone where the sun shines high at noon. The job of making the trains arrive on time required better clocks. One of the better clock manufacturers was in Switzerland. Their patent was chosen to help with the task of synchronizing the world, and there was a young patent clerk who pushed all that paperwork. This patent clerk, Albert Einstein, would later challenge the greatest scientist that ever lived, Isaac Newton, with his theory of relativity, which was initially ignored or thought too weird and radical. Some even called it Jewish science. Einstein once envisioned a room on Earth, later contemplating it in weightless space. If that room existed in a spaceship, mimicking Earth's gravity, stepping on a scale would still read 150 pounds. Astronauts may seem weightless, but scales measure our perception of weight. Place a scale in a moving elevator, and you might briefly see a 5 or 10 pound fluctuation. Einstein wondered if shining a flashlight across the spaceship would reveal a slight bend, distinguishing mechanical acceleration from gravity. He speculated that the curvature of light might be the shortest route due to Earth's curve and gravitational forces shaping space. Gravity is a significant force that has shaped our very existence since, or perhaps before, creation. But Einstein suggested that gravity is not an attractive force between two bodies, but rather a deformation of a tissue that he has called spacetime. Imagine you have a mesh of netting or cloth or trampoline stretched out, suspended, and you place a rock in the center. The mesh will curve, causing anything added to the mesh surface to move towards the first rock. Thus, our sun, for example, works the same way, warping the mesh of space-time and causing the trajectories of everything around it, such as Earth, to be affected. Now, light travels in a straight line, unaffected by gravity. It has no mass, but space-time is curved. It's not a matter of perspective, it's a fact. Space is warped by gravity, and light is bending as it travels through space-time. Upon this mention of gravity, I must now formally introduce God. Who is God? Everyone has an image in their mind. It's been put there. It's a place filler. It's a reasonable question. It's a huge question that has been banging around for many, many centuries. Is God the orderly harmony of what exists, or someone who concerns himself with the fates of humans and their meaningless drama? So-called great minds have dedicated their lives to answering that which is unanswerable by our simple means of measurement. I want to know too, outside of the biased preacher or the smarty-pants atheist. There are 39 books in the Old Testament and 27 books in the New Testament, and there are almost as many authors. And what they don't seem to agree on is the nature of God. For over 2 millennia, various arguments have been made to support God's existence. Christians cite the resurrection, with many eyewitnesses reportedly giving their lives for their faith. Supernatural events such as demonic possessions and near-death experiences are also presented as evidence. Pascal's wager suggests that believing in God is a safer bet than atheism. Considering the potential outcomes after death, the argument from personal experience acknowledges that individual perceptions shape belief, though they may not convince others. The transcendental argument suggests that rational thought and scientific inquiry are grounded in a worldview where God exists. The argument from consciousness questions natural explanations for consciousness, hinting at something immaterial, like the human soul. Finally, the argument from mathematics highlights the elegance and complexity of mathematical concepts, such as Euler's identity and the Mandelbrot set, suggesting that a designer, perhaps God, is behind them. Is God nature and the final unified theory of everything? Why do we have these so-called laws of nature rather than other laws of nature? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do we have this and not that? Is the explanation infinite and we are finite? It's a perplexing dance, with the incompleteness theorem stating that an explanation exists, but we, in our finite glory, can never grasp it. Our world has been divided into various moral societies, with Christians pitted against Muslims and Jews pitted against everyone. Most individuals in this world base their lives on the premise that God authored one of their books. These books are now available, and they offer legitimately contradictory assertions. That is contrary to morality. The universe appears designed. Why is it the way it is? There's no reason to believe this entire universe is here just for us. The biophilic nature of the universe tends to imply that the universe is here for life and its habitation. Everything that needs to be here is here and in the correct amounts. I know of no statement where God ever ordained that there should be a written document of his activities in regards to humanity, but there is. And if you're not familiar with the document, it's the Bible. It exists, and that's a good place to start. It exists. That fact alone is impressive. In the Old Testament, God is portrayed as a controller who is petty, unfair, and unforgiving. A self-designed, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malicious bully.
An unrepentant sexist, an unapologetic homophobe, a repugnant racist, and a convictable, homicidal, genocidal, infanticidal maniac.
That's how they wrote him. Now, if this character did exist, what loving God would approve of it? Regardless, the people would be obligated to speak out against such an unjust ruler. In these old stories, there are animals that can understand and imitate human speech. There's also a story of a 1,000,000-man exodus across a sea, a pillar of fire, a burning bush that speaks, and a cloud that rains fire and brimstone. This is quite the tallest of tales. It has all the makings of a Hollywood blockbuster, which it became more than once. According to the biblical narrative of Noah's flood, all land on earth, including the highest mountains, was submerged under at least 15 cubits of water, which is approximately 22 feet. This obviously applies even to that of Mount Everest, standing at 29,032 feet tall. It would have been covered by an additional 22 feet of water. Calculations indicate that to cover the Earth to this depth approximately would require 1.2 billion cubic miles of water. For perspective, the total volume of water currently on Earth, including all the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the groundwater, is about 1/4 of that amount. Thus, the flood would have necessitated quadrupling the Earth's existing water supply temporarily. The account states that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, totaling 960 hours. To raise global water levels by almost 30,000 feet within that time frame, it would need to rain at the rate of over 30 feet per hour, continuously, beyond any meteorological precedent, and would resemble the flow of a massive waterfall. The logistics of the ark also represent significant challenges. It is described as carrying 8 people: Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their wives, along with 2 of every animal species, potentially totaling millions when considering Earth's biodiversity. Managing the care, feeding, and waste removal of such a vast number of animals would be an immense task for so few individuals. Post-flood, the environment would have been devoid of vegetation and non-aquatic life, leaving no immediate food sources for the survivors. Carnivorous animals would face starvation without prey, and consuming any of the limited remaining species could lead to their extinction. Ecosystem recovery would be severely hampered by the lack of biodiversity. Additionally, the question arises, where did all the excess water go after the floodwaters receded, introducing 3 times the Earth's current water volume presents a significant issue, as there would be nowhere for this water to drain or disappear within our planetary system. To regard the Old Testament stories as true or literal fails to understand them. The ark full of animals and the flood, now this is a good story. Children love this story, as long as you leave out the genocidal drownings. Of course, there is not enough water available in the atmosphere to flood the entire surface of the planet. The Bible writers weren't concerned with specifics on how such a flood could occur. God brought the rain, and then God removed it. Where the water would go afterward was not a primary focus of the story. In Cinderella, the nature of the fairy godmother's magic and the slipper's significance take a back seat to the themes of kindness, transformation, and justice. In Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf's ability to speak and disguise himself as the grandmother are fantastical elements that serve to illustrate the themes of caution and the dangers of naivete. In The Three Little Pigs, the physics of house construction and the wolf's breath strength are secondary to the lessons about hard work, perseverance, and wisdom. In Jack and the Beanstalk, the plausibility of a beanstalk reaching the clouds are less important than the themes of adventure, bravery, and morality. And in Rapunzel, the mechanics of how Rapunzel's hair supports a prince climbing up are less important than the themes of freedom, love, and resilience. Good stories can emphasize moral lessons, character development, and imagination over precise details. Some elements are designed to captivate audiences and convey deeper meanings rather than adhere to logical or scientific explanation. The New Testament was written piecemeal, starting with the 4 Gospels, the Pauline epistles, a term applied to all of Paul's writing, and then Acts with other epistles. Revelation was written in about the year 96. The Bible was then assembled and reassembled by a committee and consensus until about the mid-4th century, when the Council of Nicaea, now Izmir, Turkey, I've been there, finally decided what books should be part of the New Testament, and then commissioned St. Jerome to translate them into Latin. In the Bible, space and time were created by God in the infinite past. All these concepts of time, space, gravity, and other forces of nature are foundational concepts that we have based all of our scientific studies around. Yet God never mentioned them, not even once. Yet so many lesser things were brought up instead. God could have elevated humanity out of the mud without foregoing sacrifice. Man could remain a pain-feeling sinner, which was his punishment. But the common knowledge God chose not to transfer is ponderous. Maybe it was all in the tree of knowledge from which they were told to stay away. Adam and Eve are portrayed as having knowledge of all things, like a god. They discovered that they were doomed to die, but they also discovered that by eating from the tree of life, they might obtain immortality. This is a great narrative, but it ends terribly when God banishes them from the garden. God wanted man to name all the animals, to be fruitful and multiply. But why? To fill the earth with more people. How many? And again, why? Just to worship him? Is this all a cosmic video game? And how many times has God hit the reset button? What was God doing before the universe? Well, there was no before. God exists timelessly. It's not a paradox or a straight line. He can traverse the fourth dimension, forward, backward, or standing still. Everything is present to him. You say, where is God today? I say, what is today? Time is a limitation that eludes the divine and imposes no constraints on God. How does the world work, and what is real? What is important, and what is petty? These are questions that I have, and thus this book needs to weigh before anything else can be put in perspective. Is there a physical world that exists apart from us? Is there such a thing as objective reality? Is the structure of everything, including space and time, generated by people who see it for people who are unaware that they cannot? We blindly assume that what we see and experience is an accurate reflection of the world around us. Neuroscience tells us that our brain takes in sensory input and creates a model of this world, the one we experience, just like a video game. It renders an image that we call reality based on past experiences and new sensory input. Our brains use this model to predict what will happen next. But how accurate is it? How can we truly understand reality when our senses and brains may not always be reliable? Despite this challenge, we can use reason and logic to gain some understanding of reality. However, biases can affect our reasoning, and it is far from perfect. The study of atomic and subatomic particles with their dual properties has led to philosophical debates about the true nature of things versus how they appear. This relates to modern physics, particularly quantum theory. Why would God, a spiritual force, have created a counterintuitive physical universe? To my simple mind, the universe is physical and controlled largely by electrical and gravitational forces. God is gravity, but more importantly, gravity is God. And that's neither blasphemy nor anti-science. It's good physics and sound theology. Albert Einstein's discovery proved that gravity isn't just an arbitrary force. It's a physical quality of the universe. Does the math of gravity make better sense if it's God or just a symptom of the malleable fabric of space? We don't have that answer since we don't understand God. But gravity isn't simply an arbitrary number that might, in theory, have any strength or power. It is the actual physical impact of space itself. And some would say, hey, presto, there's where the problem of fine-tuning disappears. The designer made these near impossible tweaks that allow life to exist from chaos, but that's only assuming you understand God and what, how, and why he might know to tweak the universe during its ignition. And that's something we cannot know. Stephen Hawking wrote, "Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing." He never directly correlated gravity with God, but who made the law? Laws are human words. Nature has no laws. It just is. Gravity is a member of the modern pantheon of gods. Zeus is an example of one of the greater mythical gods. Gravity is a force. Is there a fundamental distinction between what was once called gods and now called forces of nature? Nature and gods are phenomena that control us or that we must obey. Don't jump off that cliff now, or Zeus will punish you.